Good evening once again. This is Sharia Crime Stoppers. This is our Tuesday night webinar series. We're very happy that you joined us. We've got a great program tonight. Tonight's program is the enemies within the church. We've done a series on that topic. You may remember we've had Trevor Loudon with us. We've had a group of Catholics speak out against the enemies within the Catholic Church. We've had a group of evangelicals, and we've had a group of Jewish folks speak out about the enemies within their respective faiths. We're continuing that tonight. And tonight we're going to focus on the evangelical and Jewish remnants. These are the people that are followers of Jesus, followers of Moses, that stick closely to the Bible and understand their background, their history. They're not moving to the left. We're talking about the remnants in evangelical uniting and supporting the remnants of the Jewish faith for the purpose of saving Israel and saving America. Our guests tonight are from Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, an organization you're going to hear about the entire program. We have Laurie Cardoza-Moore, who's the president and founder of the organization, and we have Mike Goldstein, who is the general counsel, as well as the director for the state of Ohio. So with that, we're going to just bring them on and invite them to give us a little background. Thank you. There's Laurie and there's Mike. Our attendees are joining us, so we're happy to have you with us. I'm going to turn it over to Laurie and invite you to give us a little background yourself, and then invite you to introduce Mike.
Absolutely. So I am the president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and the mission of our organization is to educate Christians about their biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. We accomplish that goal by producing award-winning documentary films and television programs, distributing those programs through our 21 global media partners in 200 nations, reaching over 2 billion viewers every week. So if any of you in the audience are not familiar with our organization, you can learn more about us at PJTN.org. We also have a list on our website of the documentary films and programs we have produced. And you can always tune in every week on Saturday nights at 6:30 Eastern time to watch our Focus on Israel show on Daystar TV, or you can catch it at midnight on Sunday evenings on the East Coast as well. So we formed the organization back in 2005, but really we initiated the mission 6 months after 9/11, when I realized, as someone who was raised in the Christian faith, that Amalek had come to our shores when those twin towers were hit. And it was 6 months later that I had heard that Alabama, the state of Alabama, there was a evangelical Christian lobbyist who was introducing a resolution to stand with Israel in her war on terror, as we knew firsthand now what that meant. And so we took that resolution, brought it to Tennessee, we introduced it and passed it, not without a fight from Christians who were actually in the General Assembly at that time. But we were able to pass it. And after we passed it, because media, we use media as a platform to educate and activate people in our community, we were able to see another 35 states pick up the resolution passed in Tennessee and adopt it in their states. So it really showed me that Americans were by and large supportive of Israel. We knew that because the polls showed, even back then, almost 80% of Americans support Israel in her war on terror. And again, as we came to realize this was now our war, and how have times changed in the United States of America since that fateful day, unfortunately. So as we continue to develop the organization and organize events and programs, realizing that there were many Christians who agreed with us from a biblical perspective, and we also realized that there were a lot of Christians who were not educated, and this became the impetus for what we were doing. We did do a lot of country music videos in our career years ago, but we decided to turn the focus to Israel and start producing programming from a biblical perspective, not from what's politically expedient, and distribute that programming. And The success has been overwhelming. We've developed chapters because Christians and Jews, like you're going to hear from Mike Goldstein, understand the critical role that PJTN plays in reaching the masses of people around the world with biblical truth. Because I've always believed that if you can reach people of faith, both Jews and Christians, with a message about faith, that you will have people committed for life. And not only will they be committed, but they will teach those values and those same principles to their children and their children's children throughout their generations. So we're really trying to continue this support for Israel to future generations. Unfortunately, we see a growing number of millennials who have not accepted and adopted this. And of course, I think a lot of it has to come back to how are our children educated within the church. So one of our major campaigns that we launched as a result of educating Christians about their biblical responsibility, we've been involved in basically introducing legislation. We introduced as I said, the resolution to support the state of Israel twice here in Tennessee. We introduced a bill, an anti-BDS resolution. We used that resolution here in Tennessee to educate the state legislators because they were not familiar with this new anti-Semitic movement. And of course, we were able to pass that resolution here. And again, using our media to promote what we did here in Tennessee, we had people from 47 states contact us because they wanted to start a chapter. They wanted to introduce the resolution in their state legislature. And I just want to tell the audience the importance of the legislature, the state legislature, is really more important than the federal government. Not that the federal government doesn't have its place, but when it comes to what we're doing, what we're trying to do in fighting on the local level, it's the state legislature, it's our local school districts, it's our local county and city governments that affect the affairs of our lives on a more personal level than, of course, the federal government. Of course, when it comes to education, the federal government is not supposed to be involved in our state's education policies or curriculum. And unfortunately, the government has always found a way to get involved. So I want to turn it over to Mike now, because Mike, of course, is one of the members of our organization. He is, as was mentioned earlier, he is our Ohio State Chapter Director, but he also serves as PJTN's legal counsel. And Mike was one of those individuals who heard the call, saw the opportunity of how important his role could be in bringing this message and influencing Ohio State legislature to help us to pave the way. And of course, Mike's been involved with the introduction of the anti-BDS resolution. And just for your audience who are not familiar with that resolution that has passed in 15 states across the country, that resolution was used to educate our state legislators and the citizens, the tax-paying citizens of the state, of the anti-Semitic BDS movement that was occurring on college campuses, that was inciting the violence that we were seeing growing on university campuses, as well as the growing incidence of anti-Semitism on our K through 12 secondary campuses. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Mike's going to talk about his involvement on the state level in the state of Ohio. And so, Mike, we're going to turn it over to you and let you share about what you're doing there in Ohio in continuing to further the PJTN message.
Well, I will do that in a minute, Laurie. I know you talked about our videos and our documentaries. Could you talk a little bit about the textbook issue and how you came to be involved in that, the citizens' complaint, the parents' complaint, because it's very dramatic and the action you took was very dramatic and effective. And absolutely. I don't know what year that was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, you bring up a great point. And for our audience who is not familiar with our campaign, our K through 12 education initiative, you can find more information on our website at pjtn.org. But we had a parent in 2012 who had contacted us, who knew about our mission, our organization. She actually was a PJTN watchman, and she had contacted us because her son came home from school. They live in our community in Williamson County, Tennessee. And her son came home from school asking his mother who had legitimate rights to the land of Israel. And so his mother, of course, him coming from a strong Christian family, asked him, well, what does the Bible say? And he said, no, Mom, I know what the Bible says. He said, but tell me the truth. Who really has legitimate rights to the land? Well, his mother began to investigate and ask questions. She found the content that was and instructional materials that were given to the students that day in the class. And she contacted me and said, you're never going to believe what we're teaching our children in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. Of course, Williamson County, for those of you who are not familiar, is one of the most pro-America, pro-Israel, evangelical Christian communities. We're one of the most educated and wealthy Republican counties, one of the top 10 in the United States. So to find content like this in our school board or in our schools was a shock to us. And as we began to investigate, we went through the proper protocol. We met with the principal, met with the teacher, went to the superintendent of curriculum, went to the superintendent of schools, went to the school board, and demanded to find out who approved this textbook that had a quote in it. And let me just share with you the quote that we found in the textbook that the mother uncovered was a quote that legitimized Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. Well, we knew immediately when we saw that this was referencing the Sparrow Pizzeria bombing that took place in August of 2001. And of course, going through the proper procedure, we were told that we had to fill out an application and to have the curriculum removed. The school board went through the process, reviewing the content in the textbook, and we decided to launch a campaign on local conservative radio. Because I knew that if the parents and the citizens in our community found out what was being taught to their children in our public schools, that there would be outrage because of the large Christian community that was living here. Well, we launched a campaign for 2 weeks. We produced radio spots. We started telling parents, giving parents examples on conservative talk shows and on Christian talk shows in our community of what our children were being exposed to. And of course, we were right. The response was overwhelmingly supportive of our efforts. There was a school board meeting coming up. We let people know we needed them to show up to sign a petition. We had over 2,000 signatures on that petition within a week. There was a school board meeting, and parents, it was standing room only. And it was this evening that the school board was going to vote to remove or keep the textbook. Well, parents lined up before the vote and told the school board, we want the textbook out. It doesn't reflect our values. Of course, I got up and said that, this is an election year, and if you do not remove this textbook from our schools, then we're going to remove you from office. Well, they voted that night to keep the textbook, and we decided to go after them. We mobilized the community on a personal level. We looked for parents and citizens who were equally concerned. The community found 6 members of our community to run for school board, and that was April when we started. By August, come election time, every one of those school board members were removed. That is an example of what one community can do if we unite together to take back local control of our government, local control of our children's education. So fortunately, because we did make a lot of media noise, Fox News picked up the story. They were running with it for about 2 weeks. Our state legislature in Nashville, we were getting phone calls from the department, from the senator, the chairman of the Senate Education Committee and the House Education Committee, asking us to come testify in hearings. They were going to conduct hearings. They wanted to see the examples of what was being taught, because not only did we find anti-Semitic content as we began to research just one textbook, but we started researching all of them, and we found similar content in all of them. But the textbook was not only anti-Semitic, It was anti-American, anti-Judeo-Christian, pro-Islamic. It was, in fact, the content being taught to our children about Islam violated the U.S. and state constitutions because they favored the establishment of the religion of Islam over all others. Just the very nature of the content in the textbooks. We found the one textbook we were reviewing was a Pearson published textbook. And I'm going to come back to Pearson because it's important that we all understand who Pearson is. Pearson is not our friend. Pearson, of course, is a British-based textbook publishing company. In this textbook, there were 37 pages dedicated to Islam. Well, look at what's happening in Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And we see the rise of anti-Semitism there. We see how Europe is going by the wayside, that they're losing their rights, but it's because of the people that are influencing the content in the curriculum and what they are teaching our children. Our children are basically becoming guinea pigs for propaganda. And this whole socialist, leftist, Islamic supportive agenda is being peddled to our children every day. When we looked at the content, the amount of content about Judaism and Christianity, Judaism had 17 pages dedicated to Judaism. Christianity had only 13 pages. And for Islam to have 37 pages, it creates in the mind of our children that Islam is the dominant world religion. Well, it's not the dominant world religion. Christianity is still the largest practiced religion in the world, but you wouldn't know that if you were studying. In fact, some of the content, some of the curriculum that we found in our schools, instructional materials, was published by CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. Many of you listening are aware of who CARE is. CARE was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States of America. And so how in the world does this organization produce educational, instructional materials for our children that are being used in our public schools? It's unacceptable. So as we began to expose this, Fox News picked up the story. We ended up having we ended up hearing from parents and citizens all over the country that were tuned into Fox. And they said to us, they said, we're finding similar content in our textbooks. Can you help us? That's when we launched our nationwide campaign to expose the K-12 indoctrination of our children. We just completed a white paper that we're going to be submitting to the Secretary of Education, the President, as well as the governors of several of the states across the United States of America, like Ron DeSantis. Governor DeSantis is in the process of removing Common Core. Right. So let's get back a little bit to Common Core to Pearson, because the audience needs to understand, if you don't know who Pearson is, they are extremely dangerous. The shareholders of Pearson Publishers, remember, a British-based textbook publishing company, they are not US-based. We shouldn't have British-based companies, publishing companies, publishing material, educational material for American schools, for American children. It's unacceptable, because what bias are they going to present from their perspective? They're not concerned about American history or portraying American history to our children accurately. The shareholders include the governments of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Libya. This is the problem. Yep. And so if we're going to take back, we're looking at losing our country, ladies and gentlemen. If we're going to take back our country, those who were raised with an accurate perspective of American history, are going to have to rise up and say, not on my watch, not in my community. This is a grassroots effort. You have to, whoever is tuned in tonight, you have to be paying attention to what's being taught to your children. And whether you have children in the school system or not, it doesn't matter. You are a tax-paying citizen. As Americans, it is our responsibility to each generation, we owe it to each generation to hand over this constitutional republic intact. Our constitutional republic is shredded. Our Constitution is being shredded. And unless we, the people who have been educated properly, about our constitutional republic. If we don't stand up, there's not going to be any hope for the next generation. What will our children and our children's children do? How will they take the reins of this nation? But one of the great stories, success stories of our organization and the community that stepped up to take on this initiative was in Ohio, in Cleveland, in Columbus, several communities across the state. So having said that, I think I hit the highlights, Mike, of what you wanted me to discuss, but I'm going to turn it over to Mike, because Mike's going to talk about his impact and how he got involved with PJTN and why he is involved with our mission. Mike.
Yes, well, Dick asked me that question off the air before. How did I get involved with PJTN? And basically, I think I told him that it was very insidious and you twisted my arm. I wrote a couple of things for you, and then you said you wanted me to write more and do more and do more. And of course, I did. I want to start with a little story about something we did here. We had one parent complaint in a school district that's on the other side of town, and she was concerned because her children, she had 3 children in the school, and she didn't realize it, but the first one had seen this video, and the second one was currently about to see it. In the 7th grade world history class, it was an Islamic proselytizing video where they filmed a series of religious things. They took a 30-something Christian young man, family man from, I think, Virginia or West Virginia, and took him up to Dearborn, Michigan, which is a Palestinian city now. It's called 30 Days a Muslim. So he lived as a Muslim for 30 days. And it was produced, CARE was involved, CARE Michigan, CARE Detroit, as Laurie described. And the parent was very, very upset. It took her 2 years to get a hearing before the school board. And it was a little awkward because she herself was an employee of the school board. But she finally got this, and my wife Beverly, you may have seen her on this webinar last month, I think. No, earlier this month? Yeah, maybe. We learned about it about the day before the hearing. I'm an attorney, and I went over the material. I didn't have her as a client. I couldn't represent her yet, but she wanted me to speak about it to the board, which I did. I was supposed to get 5 minutes. They graciously gave me 15 minutes, but I explained to them that not only were they violating the United States Constitution by showing this video in the schools, but they were violating their own policies, one of which said that any material presented to the children must be accurate. And then I showed 3 or 4 different ways where it was wildly inaccurate what they were showing. And afterwards, 2 people commented. The superintendent said, well, you know, it's really a good thing to have some inaccurate materials so the teacher can teach critical learning skills, critical thinking skills, which is really stupid. That, you know, that. And in fact, the teacher never commented at all. She just showed the video. So that's what the students learned. And the other was one of the board members who was a teacher in another district who said, well, you know, we don't have very many Muslim kids here, but I teach in a school district where there are a lot of them, and they're very nice people, and we need to learn about them. So we got involved with the Thomas More Law Center, a public interest law firm in Ann Arbor that does school litigation. I got them involved, and their executive director or president was the lead counsel on it. I was local counsel on it, representing the woman. We used the Ohio Public Records Act to get the emails that went back and forth between the administration of the school and the teachers in the school. And we had all this material, and we were going to bash their heads in. We were just about to file a lawsuit when the school decided to take the video down. But that's only a pinprick. It's a success, but it's a pinprick, and it shows you what we're up against nationally, because this is going on in schools every place. I want to sort of go back to the beginning and start with Jewish revelation at Mount Sinai. We just finished the holiday of Sukkot, where we celebrate that revelation, where the entirety of the Jewish people, those who were there, those who had lived in the past, those of us who are in the future, our tradition says we were all there at Mount Sinai, and we were given the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and we were given the 10 Commandments, and the 10 Commandments are the foundation of Western civilization. And then, when the Jews were in the Holy Land, went to Jerusalem and stayed there for about 3,100 years. And there were always Jews there that entire time, even though the Romans tried to kick us out. I want to talk about anti-Semitism because that's at the basis of what's going on here. Jew hatred, which is a more accurate term for it, has been going on for a very long time, since the pharaohs, for about 3,500 years. It's very different from other hatreds and discrimination. It's not like anti-Black discrimination is not bias in jobs. What you have here is something that is different from everything else. It is a nihilistic ideology. The anti-Semites want to destroy, remove, kill every Jew on the face of the earth. That's their end goal. And in the United States today, much of this is on the college campuses. And it is fomented by the Students for Justice in Palestine, who set themselves up as underdogs. Everything they say is a lie. And they have instituted something called the BDS movement. Many of you are probably familiar with that. It's an international movement of boycotting Israeli goods and divesting from Israeli companies, and having countries create sanctions against the state of Israel. But they're not just talking about Israel. They're talking about every country that does business with Israel. For instance, they don't want to just boycott Israeli companies. They want to boycott American companies that do business with Israel. For instance, Caterpillar Tractor. They will go out and they will picket Caterpillar Tractor. Practically everybody in our defense industry is doing business with the state of Israel. They're learning from Israel. Israel's learning from them. So it would be a real hit on our economy. But the problem is this: a lot of people who are in favor of BDS, the people who are in favor of BDS and testify about it and talk on campus, many of them think they're just trying to have the Israeli government change some policies toward Palestinians. And that's not what's going on. The creators of the BDS movement are very open about it. They want to destroy the state of Israel and all the Jews living there, which is something like 6 million people. Israel has about 8 million people, 80% are Jewish. So that's what their end game is, and they're making a lot of inroads with our children and grandchildren on our campuses. So one of these things we are doing, and I'm doing in particular in Ohio, is creating anti-BDS legislation. It doesn't matter what happens at the federal level. You saw that the House of Representatives couldn't even create a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. Forget Ilhan Omar, she's a separate story. No, they had to put every hatred into their resolution until it was so watered down it didn't mean anything. So, and they didn't, so it's just silly. But regardless of what they do at the federal level, we in the states, as Laurie alluded to, are creating our own legislation, which is being fought by the Muslim Students Association, Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace, United Church of Christ, many of the mainline churches. I hope none of you in the audience are members of churches that have formal BDS resolutions. Many of them do. I think the United Church of Christ had 34 single-spaced pages of anti-Israel resolutions. So when we were doing legislation in Ohio, I will sort of skip around a little, there was testimony in favor of the resolution that Laurie and I helped draft for an Ohio state representative who asked us for help in putting one together. And there were so many lies. It was just terrible, the lies that were told by people testifying against our resolution. And in fact, all of their testimony is put up online on the state General Assembly website. And so I downloaded all those speeches, all those talks, their testimony, and I printed it out, and I said, well, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to highlight all the lies. Well, after about 10 minutes, I said, maybe I better highlight anything that was the truth, because highlighting all the lies is just too long. And that's what happened. And after a favorable vote in the House, it went over to the Senate. And before there was testimony before the Senate committee, I did a little synopsis of the testimony against the bill and why, and listed a lot of the lies and showed what the really true facts were. So I submitted that, and so the senators on the committee had that in front of them before they heard from the people. By the testimony. By the way, opposition testimony in the Senate, I couldn't be there. I was down in Tennessee testifying before a subcommittee of the Tennessee House Education Committee that day. And I'm getting telephone calls from the State House in Columbus about things. It was, sometimes when you're in this business, your head can spin. Okay, so let me tell you what's going on. The BDS on campus is terrible. I recommend, and I think Dick has some of the documents he can put up online, that you look at something called the AMCHA, AMCHA initiative. The AMCHA initiative is some researchers who put out incredible reports and gather data and put out incredible reports. They have an anti-Semitism tracker online for universities. Not all universities, but universities who have a significant number of Jewish students. And their anti-Semitism tracker is organized by state and by school. You can look up your state, you can look up the school, the college you're concerned with, and you can click on it, and then you will get all the reported anti-Semitic incidents for the last 2 or 3 years, all of them. And they're described and they're categorized as whether they demonize Israel, if there are lies about this or lies about that. And it's updated, I believe, every week, maybe every month, but I think it's every week. So take a look at that. And then there is a group called the Canary Project, Canary Mission, the canary in the coal mine. The Canary Mission has, they put out select reports. No one knows who these folks are. They're doing their research, and I'll explain that in a minute, but they don't want anybody to know who they are. And the press, the media complain about these shadowy people who are doing it, but never can criticize the accuracy of what they put out because it's true. I'll just explain a report they did here in Cleveland in 2017. They put it out in April. They looked at the local colleges, and they looked at the social media posts of people who were members of Students for Justice in Palestine and the Muslim Students Association and organizations of that ilk. And they took their social media posts and just put them up there online, and they categorized them into anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Black, anti-gay, and they quoted them completely. And they are just bizarrely horrible and disgusting. But then when you look at the people that they were looking at, you see that many of them have graduated, that some are real estate agents, some are working in the car rental industry, some are banking. You know, this is really scary. People who think like this are in our businesses and in our neighborhoods, and that is why anti-Semitism is going up. First of all, it's the Muslim integration. Muslim refugee resettlement program. The legal immigrants, they're chosen, selected by the United Nations, and they are sent here. And alleged charities, they're not charities, although they have Christian and Jewish names, they are contractors for our federal government who get paid to put these people down in your community when you don't even know they're coming, and then your community is responsible for their health care, their education. There's a school district up in New England that has to teach everything in 86 languages now. I think that was the figure. I mean, it's horrible. I don't know. And nobody can afford it. So that's the stuff that's going on. And according to AMCHA, it's getting worse and worse on the college campuses. So what do? There is anti-BDS legislation in the states. I think, 26 states now, Laurie, we've passed it. Ohio is a little different from some of the others because I use stronger language. But there are two kinds of anti-BDS legislation, what I call commercial, and another what I call is public policy. Commercial anti-BDS legislation says, okay, you're a company, you want to do business with the state of Ohio, and it's, you know, worth $5 million or $150,000, whatever it is. If you have a company and you want to do business with the state of Ohio, your contract is going to say that you may not practice BDS. You can't boycott Israel. You can't boycott American companies in your business. You have to do business with them, even if they're supporting Israel. That was litigated and it's constitutional, and that's fine. It doesn't violate free speech. In your private capacity, you can go out and urge people to practice BDS, but your company cannot do it. And that's been very successful. And then we have what I call public policy. It's, instead of a regular bill, it is a resolution. In Ohio, it's House Concurrent Resolution 10. And we got it passed last December of 2018. And what this does, some people will say, well, you know, it's just a resolution, it doesn't matter. It's like, you know, commending the high school championship golf team or something. No, it's not. No, it's not. What it does is it sets forth the public policy of the General Assembly of the state of Ohio, and through them, the people of the state of Ohio on a given issue. And HCR 10, which is the one we passed in Ohio, it's pro-Israel, and it is anti-BDS. It condemns BDS, and it also condemns Nazis and white supremacists as well. What this means is, having passed it, the BDS proponents are in the same moral, they're the moral equivalents of the Nazis, which I think is a pretty good thing for people to know. But it talks about all the good things that are happening, you know, between the state of Ohio and the state of Israel, in business, in culture, in ethics and morals, and then it says, the state of Ohio agrees that Israel is entitled to self-determination within its own country. They can decide who they want, who they don't want. They're permitted legitimate acts of self-defense. You know, the federal President Obama's administration would say, well, yeah, there are 10,000 missiles coming in, and they're trying to hit your civilians, your women and children, but Israel needs to be more restrained in its response. And Ohio says, no, they don't. They're entitled to do these things. And there is a laundry list, but it also says that on college campuses, the administrators are urged to allow complete free speech for anyone. Free speech is free speech. Shouting down people who are trying to exercise their right to free speech is not free speech. And that's what has been going on a lot of campuses. Jewish groups on campuses, for instance, there's something called tabling. If you've got kids or grandkids in college, you know what this is. There's a public area. Legitimate student organizations are allowed to put up tables and posters and talk to people. Well, at San Francisco State University, for instance, the Jewish groups were said, well, you can't be tabling with these other groups because we're told it might lead to violence. Now, the violence would have been against the Jewish students, but they were cut off from their freedom of speech and expression by the university administrators. And when you look at the lawsuit that was filed by the students and the student organizations and people in the community against San Francisco State University, when you see what was going on there, it read like Nuremberg, Germany in 1936. It was just horrible, and the university administration was complicit. They were encouraging it. So we don't want that to get to Ohio. So we're encouraging the right of free speech. We're encouraging administrators in college to come down against BDS, as they should, and to discipline anybody in the university community who's practicing it. Students, faculty, administrators. Now, that's been since December. Oh, and by the way, just so you'll know how well PJTN is doing, we passed the Ohio House 92-2, and we passed the Ohio Senate 30-0 last December. So that was pretty good. So the people of the state of Ohio have spoken. This is what they want to have happen. Now, just this week I was talking to people. I said, well, you know, we have to check. Oh, maybe we'll ask AMCHA to look at it. Are things getting better on Ohio campuses? Is this working? If they're not, and I haven't even told Laurie this, I think, what I want to do is turn that resolution into a real bill with teeth that will provide punishments to universities that don't comply. Because if they're not doing anything to fix it now, maybe we can work on that next. So those are the two kinds of anti-BDS legislation we have. But now we started work on introducing a new bill, both in Tennessee and in Ohio, called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And this is a bill that will actually define anti-Semitism. And the reason for this is there is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is Title VI. And Title VI prohibits discrimination on college campuses and other places against people based on their ethnic or national origin. And that's been applied to Jewish students. Unfortunately, it doesn't offer any protection for the friends of the Jewish students or Christian Zionists, but we'll have to figure out something to do to protect them. But a federal lawsuit can be filed under Title VI, under the freedom of speech in First Amendment, and Amendment 14, which applies this to the states, which is what happened in San Francisco. So how do you define anti-Semitism? A parent complains, a student complains to the university and says, there is so much anti-Semitism going on this campus that I can't get a good education, which is the basis for filing the suit. And the university is required to do an investigation. And they say, well, it's not really anti-Semitism. That's not what it is. There's no legal definition in the state of Ohio that tells you what anti-Semitism is. And this is going to do it, and based upon an article put out by the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under the Law. And the founder of the Louis D. Brandeis Center is Ken Marcus, who is no longer with the organization. He is the Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights now in the Department of Education. And this is the definition used by the Department of Education also. And I would ask that among whatever he's going to put on the website, that Dick put a copy of this on the website. I understand that's among the documents that were sent to you. The hardest part of defining anti-Semitism, well, the definition here is the definition that's used by the Department of State, which is fine, except the Department of State can only enforce it outside of the United States because it's the State Department. But now it's in the Education Department. And the hardest part is that the students on campus, Students for Justice in Palestine and people like that, they used to say, well, the Jews are terrible. The Jews are doing this. The Jews are doing that. Oops. Come back.
You're good.
I'm good. Everybody's lying on their side. Okay.
You're
All right. So they're saying they were really anti-Semitic in the way they were talking about Jews. Well, now that people are looking at that, they say, no, it's not the Jews. It's the Zionists. They just substitute the word Zionists for the word Jews. So this document talks about what is anti-Semitism relative to Israel. When is anti-Israel activity legitimate criticism of the Israeli government policies, and when is it just anti-Semitism? So that'll be in the bill. Most of the language of the bills that were introduced in Tennessee and in Ohio consists of this definition. That'll have to be used by the schools. When a parent complains, I think Laurie saw something when she was picking up her kid at school one day, something was going on. I don't know, it was swastikas or something in the junior high school. The administration will have to do an investigation in cases like that, and they will be required to use this definition, which will help us a lot. I think it's a very important bill, and we're going to try to introduce it in other states as well. So now, a very important part of this is, how do you go about getting something like this passed into law? What we did in Ohio is something that we urge people to do in every state. I developed a coalition of organizations to be with us and to speak, give their testimony in the committees, to visit their state senators and state representatives to talk about it. And here's the 4 organizations, 5 actually, that we used in the state of Ohio. There was us, which is Proclaiming Justice in the Nations, which has a Jewish General Counsel and Ohio State Director, but it's a Christian organization. The Ohio Christian Alliance, the president of the Ohio Christian Alliance is Chris Long, and we've been working with Chris on all sorts of legislation for a long time, and he's a good friend. There is CUFI, Christians United for Israel. My wife Beverly and I are members, Jewish members of Christians United for Israel, which has about 5 million members, I think now, maybe not that many. And then we have CUFI's Ohio director, who's Ed Douglas, very important to us. And then Agudath Israel of America. The Ohio director is Rabbi Yitz Frank, and that is the umbrella organization for the most orthodox of Jewish rabbis in the United States. So that was our coalition plus Act for America. Many of you are probably familiar with Act for America. It's the Bridget Gabriel's organization, but it's pretty independent here in Cleveland. And whenever I needed people to call their legislators, to call other people to promote one aspect or another, oh, the bill's in committee, go call the committee chairs, oh, the bill's going to be voted on, call the committee members, oh, it's in the House, call all your representatives. They came out and they were they did it. They had the numbers and they did it. I do want to back up a little. Talking about the resolution we passed, so 2 of the witnesses we had were students. One was at John Carroll University. He was head of the Jewish Hillel at John Carroll University. He wanted to bring in a pro-Israeli speaker, and he happened to be an Arab who decided, since he'd been to Israel and seen it, that he liked it, and he was on tour giving pro-Israel speeches, and the Arab students on campus didn't like it. And the administration sided with the Arab students and tried to block him from speaking. And he testified about that. And then we had another gentleman who had graduated from Ohio University and was working in Pittsburgh in commercial real estate. But when he was a student at Ohio University, at a student senate meeting in the public area where they could talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, his group, he was a member of a group of 4 pro-Israel Jewish students who were speaking on a subject, which was a little sensitive because they wanted to remove the president of the Senate. They wanted her to step down for some very anti-Semitic things she was doing. So she after 2 minutes, she had them arrested. The university police came, put them in handcuffs, and took them away at the behest of the president of the Senate. And there were university administrators there who just let them be arrested. And it's affected them. It was a year of their lives involved in criminal litigation. And now whenever one of them goes to get a job, they say, well, what was this arrest for in 2014? So that's going on our campuses. So that's what we do. Now, what I urge everybody to do is, I didn't know Ed Douglas right away. I didn't know Chris Long right away. I didn't even know Rabbi Yitz Frank right away. My wife and I started going to meetings of, these were all conservative organizations, including the Republican Jewish Coalition, and Tea Party meetings, and lots of people. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, you get to know a lot of people, and you get to work with them. You know them. They are friends. And that's what I urge everybody in the audience to do. Widen your circle. Widen your circle. Get to know these people. And when the time comes, when you have some action, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be legislative, get them together so that you are a body of 4 organizations, 6 organizations, and people will listen to you. Because there's strength in numbers. Also, I urge people to do this. We're going to want you, or whatever organization is going to want you to contact your legislator, federal or state, on various issues. Don't wait for them to ask you. Go online. For instance, your state representative. Go on the website. See what that person is voting on, what legislation that person has introduced. Look at it a little. You don't have to study all that hard. Get in touch with them, send them an email, give them a call. Hey, I really like what you did, or I have a little criticism of what you did, but I'm following, and I want you to know that I'm on your side, and I want you to do a good job. And then when it hits the fan 3 years later, and you need that person to vote for something because things are really going to hell in a handbasket, then you can call them and they'll take your call, or they'll read your email, or whatever it is. But don't leave those things to the last minute. Get politically active at that extent, to that extent, because you are their constituent. Oh, when I gave my testimony to the Board of Education in this other school district, I want to go back to that, they paid no attention to me whatsoever. They didn't care. You have to be somebody who is in their district and votes for them or votes against them. That's the only thing they care about. So you're going to need spokesmen in every school district. You're going to need spokesmen in every congressional district, state representative and senator district. Get to know the folks. And, you know, if you go down to your state capital and talk to them, they'll appreciate it. They love constituents who come in to talk to them. Just get an appointment. Don't just show up because they may not be there. I think that's about the sum that I wanted to talk about. I'm very happy with the team I have here in Ohio, and I'm very happy with the team we have at PJTN headquarters in Nashville. And things can always be going better. Laurie, I would like to pass this back to you to talk about the Watchman on the Wall program.
Can I interrupt for just a second, Laurie? I want to make a point here. This is really valuable. We want people to be on our program to look for action items. Between the two of you, you've talked about very practical, pragmatic action items. I want to let people know on your website, there's a whole section on education and textbooks. There's a petition. There's a methodology to eliminate anti-Semitism. There's a grassroots initiative. There are various specific action items in writing on your website. So I just want to make that point.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, the PJTN.org website is a great resource for everyone to go to learn more, to read the articles. There are ways to get engaged in the battle. We are a grassroots mobilization, education and mobilization organization. The key to mobilizing a community is being educated. We are all looking at 2020 elections, and not just the presidential election, not just Congress, but we also are looking at our state legislatures. We're looking at our school superintendents. We're looking at our school board members. We have got to become informed. Yeah. And for the audience that's watching, if you do not know who your school board member is, I would encourage you to go and do the research, go to the website for your school district, get to know who those school board members are, and find out where they are on the issues that you're going to learn about on the website. We, as I mentioned, we are grassroots, and there's a great analogy that I always use in the book of Nehemiah. And if you haven't read that book, and if you've never read the book, or it's been a while since you've read it, I encourage you to go back and read it, because there's a wonderful strategy that is laid out. And when Nehemiah was given the authority to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he went and assessed the damage. And then he went to leaders of districts who were in front of sections of the wall. And he went to others who lived in front of other sections of the wall. And he convinced all of them to rebuild their section. And if we remember, when they were rebuilding, they would lay bricks with one hand, but they had a sword to fight off the enemy with the other. As we rebuild our nation, we're going to have to fight through the process, because the enemy that has taken the territory is not going to relinquish it easily. And so we have got to be in this battle for the long haul. And if we will do that, as in Nehemiah was able to rebuild the walls of the city in record time. And each one of our school districts across every state, across this nation, is a section of the wall of our nation. And if we can mobilize our neighbors in our community to join us in this effort, we can take back this country. The elections are coming up. You must know who you're voting for. And if you don't know who's going to be on that ballot, then ask your the board of elections in your community, in your county. Find out who's going to be running for office. Get to know these people, because this is the way we're going to take back our country. If we do not rise up, we will lose this nation. And it's critically important that we unite together. I so appreciate what Mike shared about building strong coalitions with other organizations. But PJTN is a grassroots organization that educates Christians to stand against the rise of this anti-Semitism. It's happening in our communities. As Mike said, I picked my daughter up from school one day in a middle school in Williamson County. This was after we found the textbook. And 5 young men walked past my vehicle. They saw a bumper sticker on the back of my car that said protect and defend, and it had the Israeli flag and the US flag. And when these young men, 5 of them, walked past my vehicle, 2 of them did the Sig Heil, saluted Hitler to me. It was the most frightening experience I have ever had. For a parent in my own community where I thought I was safe, the children, these are high school kids, are saluting Hitler to me. And I asked the question, where were those kids on Sunday? Because I'll bet you, because 99% of the people living in this community are Christians, I'll bet you they were in a Sunday school class. But they still felt that they had the freedom to intimidate a mother, a parent in their community. It's very frightening what is happening, but we need as watchmen on the wall. The Watchman program is so critically important. For those of you who want to support us, you can go to our PJTN website, sign up to get on our mailing list, become a monthly contributor for just $20 a month to help us mobilize the masses. If you're on social media, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And we also have a YouTube page. It's PJTN TV on YouTube. There are many award-winning videos, documentaries that are listed there on the website that you can go and watch, or on YouTube. And you can share them with your social media friends. Share them with your email friends, people who are following you. This is a great way of educating our friends, our family, our neighbors about the seriousness of the hour and how they can get involved.
Well, thank you. And let's keep going. We want to remind everybody the way we got into this, Laurie and Mike, is we started talking about the strategic infiltration of the churches in America. We had Trevor Loudon on, and he got us started into that and to understand the deep infiltration within the church. So a lot of the, quote, Christian churches, even the evangelical churches, we've had Filippini with us who explained that even evangelicals are sliding to the left. They're forgetting about the Bible. And in the process, there's an increase in anti-Semitism, both from Islam as well as from, unfortunately, lingering anti-Semitism from the European connection, which would have been more related to Christianity. So this is a critical point. In fact, the reason we got to know your organization, Laurie, is our friend Bev Goldstein, who is nearby, Mike Goldstein at this moment. She was on our program, and she talked about Jewish people who leave their rabbi, leave their temple, because they can see that there's Jewish people in that temple who really are ambivalent about being Jewish. And they won't stand up against Jew hatred, and they won't stand up in support for Israel. And we heard about Jews who have nowhere to go. Well, now we have a conversation where there are places, this place, proclaiming justice to the nations is an ideal place for Jews who feel disenfranchised to reach out, like Bev and Mike. Great story, great action-oriented people who connected to an organization which has been in existence for quite a while, doing wonderful work. We want to make this point. This is a great example of unifying the Jewish remnant and the evangelical remnant to do some really, really good work and to be focused on, among other things, getting out to vote, making your own decisions, but being informed when you go to the polls so that it's not acceptable in 2020, in the primary season, local, state, national, for Christians or Jews to just stay home, to not register and not vote. It's that critical. So we want to just try to tie that together, Laura. That's why we're doing this, and you've done a great job with Michael of putting the practicality and the effectiveness of this organization and putting it on the table for people to consider as a way to get involved.
Well, we're delighted to be able to be here tonight and to be able to share the story. And we do want to encourage your audience to join us in this battle. You know, there's a great scripture in the book of Isaiah in chapter 11, I believe it is, where it talks about this unification of Jews and Christians coming back together again. And we see the evidence of that across this country, where we are uniting to defend our faith. And in the book of Isaiah, it says that there will come a day in the last days when Ephraim will stop being jealous of Judah, and Judah will stop vexing Ephraim, and they will unite together. And here we are living in one of the most miraculous times in all of history, that God would allow us to be here at this time and give us the gifts that each one of us have. Each of us have an important role to play in this mission. And the fact that we're alive, the fact that he has given us, each one of us as individuals, our gifts, and then brought us together to collectively work together as a team to uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. I count it a great honor to have members of the Jewish community like Mike, like Bab, and others who are standing with PJTN in fighting this battle.
Well, it's wonderful to see the two of you in action. We heard a lot about Ohio, a lot about Tennessee. Can you give me one other state? I'm going to bring up a state. You mentioned the individual governor, Ron DeSantis. I happen to be spending time. We're happy to be in the United West studio, which is in Florida. And so I'm more aware than I was about Ron DeSantis. I believe Ron DeSantis went to Israel for last year when the embassy was viewed. I think he was in Israel again this year. Is there, I would assume that Ron DeSantis would be an example of someone who gets the issue you talked about. If I understand it right, we have an initiative here or a resolution to take Common Core out of the schools. That was part of the initiative with Ron DeSantis. Say a few words, if you can, about what's happening in Florida, just as an example.
Yes, it's very exciting because Ron DeSantis, a couple of years ago, when he was still a congressman and he was considering running for governor in Florida, I had brought to him some of the egregious examples of the content in the textbooks that we were finding across the country. And he said to me, he said, we are going to work to get rid of this curriculum. And he said, if I'm elected governor in Florida, we are getting rid of Common Core. And, you know, Governor DeSantis has been true to his word. In fact, I was just in Israel when he was there being honored at a mutual friend's home for signing into law the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. That legislation is so key and so important to the state of Florida, to our overall effort, because in Florida, Governor DeSantis has given charged his education commissioner to present a plan to pull Common Core by January of 2020. Wow. Remove Common Core. He signs this new legislation into law. Wow. The content in the textbooks and the curriculum being used in the state of Florida is now in violation. In fact, we put out a press release last week calling on the school districts across the state of Florida to implement a task force to review the curriculum, the textbooks, the instructional materials, to ensure that they are in compliance with this new law. Because we already have in our hands examples of how the law is being violated. So, and
they will be violating it at every turn. We really need to watch them. It's the deep state within the state.
Yeah, so we are in the process of, in fact, I'll be heading back to Florida this weekend to work with the team there. We've mobilized parents and citizens in 20 counties across the state there as well to take back, again, local control. They are the watchmen. They keep watching their own community. And it's so critically important that we get engaged in this battle. We can't leave it to someone else to do it. If we're in earshot of this, then we're all responsible to get engaged ourselves.
So there's an action item. If you're in Florida, you go to the website, pjtn.org, and identify yourself to this organization and get involved. Clearly, there's a specific set of actions that each state can deal with knowing that there's something going on in Florida. Certainly activate people. These connections, by the way, are going to be useful down the road for other activities. And again, ultimately, there are primaries in Ohio and Florida and other states coming next year and active general elections. So we need people, the kind of people we're talking to. These are people who are people of the book. They know the people of the book are targets for Sharia-oriented people. This is Sharia Crime Stoppers. Obviously, we're concerned about the increase in Sharia crime. So basically, the people of the book, Christians and Jews, are the target. To see an organization that is uniting evangelical Christians and Jews is a wonderful thing. We commend you for that. One closing comment. If you could just talk a little bit about when we have, there's 2 or 3 names that we hear that tell us about anti-Semitism, because they are blatantly anti-Semitism. I'm just going to throw those names and ask you to talk a little bit about, I believe you've got a petition related to Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and the other lady.
Absolutely. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the 3 musketeers that keep on giving. Right. No, we have a petition on our website calling for the removal of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. They are anti-Semites. Not only are they anti-Semitic, they should not, never before did I think that I would ever see a sitting member of Congress so blatantly support or make comments that were anti-Semitic, reciting statements from the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, a fraudulent document that was stated as a fraud by a Russian civic court. And here these women are restating and reciting these different nuances of anti-Semitism, these anti-Semitic quotes. It is unacceptable. But not only that, these women have spoken for fundraising events for Muslim Brotherhood front groups. They are a threat to our national security. Ilhan Omar sits on the House Foreign Relations or Foreign Affairs Committee. She has no right being there. She has access to information that she shouldn't have access to. She could share that information with these Muslim Brotherhood front groups that she's raising money for and jeopardize the security of our friends and allies, especially Israel, and also jeopardize the security of America. These women have to go. We have a petition on the website. We need everybody to sign it. We need you to share that petition. I think we have close to 40,000 signatures. We're trying to acquire 100,000 so we can resubmit the petition to the speaker, demanding that she call up articles of impeachment on Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib because of their association with these Muslim Brotherhood front groups. They are in violation of federal law because they are raising money for these different groups. And of course, we know who CARE is. Islamic Relief was one of the other ones, Islamic Relief USA. They're a Muslim Brotherhood group. And these 2 women are running around skirting about the nation, raising money for them. They don't belong in Congress. They need to be removed. You know, it's funny how Ilhan Omar gets all upset and accuses everybody of being Islamophobic, of being racist, of weaponizing anti-Semitism, to try to remove her from office because they're trying to silence her. Well, you know what? What happened to Judge Jeanine Pirro? Because Judge Jeanine had a right to ask Ilhan Omar about where her loyalties lie, especially because she wears the traditional garb that tells us she's a religious woman, and especially because she's speaking to these Muslim Brotherhood front groups. Yes, Ilhan Omar, we do want to know where your loyalties lie, and we're grateful for Judge Jeanine that she even asked you the question, but Judge Jeanine had to pay a price. Shame on Fox News that they would have the audacity to remove her show for 3 weeks because CARE shows up and complains and tells her she needs to apologize.
The blatant anti-Semitism, people, I think the word more appropriate is Jew hatred, as we said earlier, you said earlier. The blatant Jew hatred that we see every single day should be the wake-up call for everyone associated with evangelical Christianity and the Jewish remnant. First they came for Jews, then they came for other folks. So let's keep that in mind. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that if in your state, I mean, you folks out there in the audience are from all over the country, I believe. Yep. If you have a group of people in your state who want to have a PJTN chapter, and you contact us after you put them together, we will come to you. We will help you set it up. So, so we would like to spread our influence, and not our influence, but what we're doing to people in the grassroots who are the lifeblood of this country.
Yeah.
And I think you can see that this group is effective. So with that, we're going to thank Michael. We're going to thank Laurie as well for being with us tonight. Thank you so much. We're going to continue for another 4 or 5 minutes just to talk about what's coming up. But do you have any closing remarks, Laurie, that you would like to end with?
No, I just want to thank your audience for tuning in, for being educated, for getting informed. And again, I want to just encourage you, go to our website at pjtn.org, sign the petition, sign up to get on our mailing list, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on all of our social media outlets, and go to YouTube, subscribe to our PJTN TV page, become educated, become informed, and then educate and inform your friends, your family, your neighbors.
We have some questions. I think I got ahead of myself. Hang on a little minute. Maybe.
Okay, I do want to say, if folks out there need help with state legislation, contact us and we'll help you.
Okay, and Mary, we're going to invite Mary to come back on. I almost ignored the question, which is a no-no. So if you would just bear with us for a few minutes, we may have some questions that we can address. I'm sorry about that, Mary.
Sorry, I clicked
got ahead of myself. So what do we have for questions?
Well, I kind of wondered about that. I was going to pop in. We have quite a few that just popped in. Somebody asked about a PJTN chapter in Ohio, and Mike, I answered that yes, you're the president of it. So we will get some information. Well, you want to share how to contact you if there's somebody in Ohio that wants to join you?
Well, I'm the Ohio State Director. You can contact me at, let's see, it's Mike G at pjtn.org.
Okay. And another simple question, they asked for what the website is. Can you give that website again? They had some audio problems.
Go ahead, Laurie.
Oh, it's pjtn.org. P as in Paul, J as in John, T as in Tom, N as in Nancy.org.
Okay, I also typed it to them as well. So Sarah's asking, Mike, you spoke of the importance of defining anti-Semitism in working on legislation. What is that definition?
Well, it's very long and it gives examples. It's in the document that was produced by the Louis D. Brandeis Center.
Is that the document you referenced that you'd like us to post?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, why don't we go ahead?
You see, it's a six-page document. So,
okay.
But it gives definitions, and it gives contemporary examples of anti-Semitism, and particularly relative to Israel. For instance, demonizing Israel, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, blaming Israel for all inter-religious or political tensions, or applying a double standard for Israel by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, or multilateral organizations like the UN Human Rights Council, focusing on Israel only for peace or human rights investigations, or to attempts to delegitimize Israel.
Okay.
So those are anti-Semitic under the definition.
Send it to me and I'll get it posted with the video tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, I believe Dick has it both on paper and electronically.
Okay, great. We'll get that posted so everybody has access to it.
Sure.
Cindy's asking, are there PJTN chapters in Canada? And is Canada experiencing the same issues?
Well, it's interesting because we do have a lot of friends in Canada. We do not have a chapter that's been formed yet. But because of the broadcast of our Focus on Israel show that broadcast on Daystar TV every week, we're actually reaching Christians all over the world. In Canada, we have a large following up there. And in fact, one of the new areas that we're getting ready to, we just started our first chapter is in Johannesburg, South Africa, because of our viewers. And we're getting ready to start one in Australia and in the Netherlands. So what's happening is our message, even though there may be different cultural aspects to these different countries, the one thing that resonates with all of us is that we are standing on the Bible, on the Word of God. And people are contacting us from around the world who want to start a PJTN chapter to fight anti-Semitism in their community, whether it's through their textbooks, on their college campuses, or the defacing of Jewish cemeteries, or the attacks of Jews in communities. It's amazing to see how Christians and Jews are uniting together, like we said earlier, around the world to stand together. So yes, Canada, you are on PJTN's radar. And if there's anyone up there who wants to start a chapter, we'd be happy, as Mike said, to come up there and meet with you and help mobilize your community as well.
And do you have somewhere on your website where you're advertising what chapters you have in other states so that people can kind of try to link with some folks to join?
You know, we're actually updating our website as we speak to make it more user-friendly and also more engagement with some of the individuals. And I do believe we do have a page. I don't know if it's up right now, but we do have a page that lists where our chapters are around the country and, of course, across the globe now.
Excellent.
So go to the website, pjtn.org, and if you're interested, email us and let us know of your interest, and we'd love to talk to you about it.
Excellent, because we're getting actually quite a few questions about what state you're in and how they can get engaged, so that's perfect. Here's some specific questions. Mike's asking, he makes a comment first. Since 1989, Sharifa El-Khatib, Islamic educator, was involved in forming an Islamic coalition to review and change school textbooks in favor of Islamic views. That's when it began. Do a word search, make All America Muslim, or a video of her speech. Anyone aware of Sharifa El-Khatib?
Well, the indoctrination in our children's textbooks and curriculum has been going on for a long time. Of course, Bill and Melinda Gates really ramped it up in 2006 when the United Nations had their G8 summit in Moscow. And that's where Common Core, the concept of Common Core, was introduced. And because it was introduced at the United Nations, of course, the United Nations encouraged all of its member states to adopt the Common Core. And that's why we have it in our country. And it's unfortunate that the federal government has been part of this. And now we are fighting to remove Common Core in every state across this nation. That's why we commend Governor Ron DeSantis, because we've had governors in states that have adopted Common Core who told their constituents or their citizens, oh no, we're going to remove Common Core. They didn't. They renamed it. In Florida, Governor DeSantis is not renaming it. He's removing it.
Yeah, amen to that. And our last question is, I am concerned about having definitions of discrimination about everyone except white Americans. In Minnesota, H.R. 831 was supposed to be a reprimand of Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman who married her brother to bypass our immigration laws, but instead, H.R. 831 blamed white people for being racist against Muslims. Thoughts?
Yeah, we have to be careful when we see these efforts, and especially with the Holocaust, when we see initiatives to do one thing, but then you read the legislation, and actually the legislation does something totally different. This is how they manipulate the system, and they get legislation passed, and before you know it, the camel's nose is under the tent, and there's no getting him. And then, you know, you turn around and the camel's in the tent. So it's very dangerous what is happening. We have to follow closely what's happening in our state legislatures. Again, it comes back to we the people. We have the government we have because of the lack of being involved for many, many years. And now we're having to play catch up. But we can win this battle, and we're standing on the right side of history. We shouldn't be ashamed, and it requires all of us to do our part.
Yes.
That's why we're here today.
Agreed. And that's the end of the questions. Dick, if you want to go ahead and close us out.
One thing, I've just been informed that when I said that if you need help, any of the audience needs help creating or looking at state legislation that they want to create in this area, contact me and I will be happy to help you with that.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Sorry,
So
Dick.
That's okay. We're very impressed with the team. We heard a real team tonight. We have a visionary, a leader, a lawyer, a good lawyer, and great team. So we want to thank both of you for being with us tonight, Michael and Laurie. Thank you very, very much. We're going to proceed now with just another 3 or 4 minutes of what's coming up. If that's okay, we'll say good night to Laurie and Mike, and we'll just proceed. We've got a few more things planned, so we want to just let you know about that. Let's see if we can go through a few slides here. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Okay, let me try that again. Sorry about that. I'm looking for this. And now we'll proceed. All right. So, by the way, this is the page. This is the Proclaiming Justice for the Nation page where you can go, an action item just for people. One of the many you heard tonight. Go there, sign the petition. When you're there, look at the entire website and get involved. What's coming up? Well, wait a minute. What's coming up? What just happened? Last Friday night, we had a radio program with a podcast with a very, very smart person, Christopher Holton. Like the conversation tonight, he talked about local legislation, statewide legislation, and he's with the Center for Security Policy. We would invite you. We talked about many topics, including whether or not the Muslim Brotherhood actually owns the Defense Department as well as other agencies. This podcast is very informative. You'll hear a lot of things about local initiatives within your state that are encouraging. But what's coming up next? Well, we're going to go back next Tuesday night. We have another webinar. That will be the second of the new month of July. We're going to talk about Qatar. By the way, Qatar is where some of the money for the Pearson textbooks comes from. A lot of the money from Qatar it's called blood money. We're going to show a documentary and have a conversation with one of the people in the documentary. His name is Michael Waller. He's with the Center for Security Policy. It's very, very important to understand all the money that comes from Qatar into the nation's capital and affects American policy. The following week, we're going to proceed and continue our conversation about mosques. This time, we're going to focus on U.S.-based mosques. The gentleman who has been in 300 mosques in America is Dave Gabas. That's his book, Muslim Mafia. Our David Boris will be with him. That'll be all about American mosques, so please don't miss that one. The next Tuesday, we're continuing, and that'll be the 16th. We're going to have Claire Lopez, and she's going to give us a presentation based on her recent trip to Israel, lessons learned from the sovereign nation of Israel. The word sovereign is the key there, and we'll proceed with that. So we intend to keep you busy on Tuesday nights. We thank you for your attention again. Friday night this week, and on an ongoing basis, we have our webinar program, The United West, is where the Sharia Crime Stoppers page is located. You can learn all about us there. You can get copies of things. We will post this as a podcast, and Mary does a great job of posting. We'll include some of the references so that you can follow links, etc., and continue to get informed about proclaiming justice to the nations. And we are part of the United West. We are in the United West studios. We're a proud member of this organization. We would invite you to consider helping us continue with any donations you might care to share. We want to thank Mary Warabicki for making everything happen. And with that, we'll say good night and look forward to seeing you on Friday night on the radio and next week on the webinar. Thank you. Good night.